Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Cafecito Chats with Ship San Diego Professional Chapter. Once again, it is Wednesday, and we have a meeting scheduled for all of us today. And we meet at the accorded time, which is 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. And today, as always, we're going to have a great session. But today, in particular, we have a great guest of honor. His name is Dr. Chris Wilkie, and he is the CEO of Ship National. But we're making this effort and time for him to join us and to meet with us, the membership at large in San Diego, in our local general area, where we can talk and connect with each other as we've always done, and make sure that we bring topics to the table, right? So, Dr. Chris Wilkie, welcome to Ship San Diego Cafecito Chats. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here with us. So we were just earlier, we touched base and we had a conversation, and you said, hey, I want to ask of support from the membership. And I said, yes, of course, you're more than welcome to jump in. But before we get to that portion, you are the CEO of Ship. And
Yeah.
Mike Cruz was just before we started recording, he had asked you, how did you get into Ship at the national level? And if you can summarize it a little bit, and then we can get started and going into the conversation.
No, thanks. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Love these types of opportunities and the small group setting. It's a little more intimate, and we get to dive into some real conversation versus maybe presenting on a topic or something like that. So, very glad to be here. And great question. I oftentimes get asked how did the white male end up as the CEO of a Hispanic organization such as SHIP. And if you look back on my education, I'm not in STEM. I don't have the hard science degrees or technology degrees or anything either. But what I think really separates me from the candidate pool, as I heard, and ultimately, how I landed the position, was the 20 plus years of service that I've had in the nonprofit industry. And being developing expertise in creating programming and services that served a specific audience, or a specific segment of the community. So as I was explaining, I started my career in substance abuse and mental health. That quickly transitioned into public health overall, with an emphasis in infectious disease and HIV. And when you're dealing with public health type initiatives, you're talking with pretty much anybody and everybody. And so many of the demographic factors that we all lean into and we get wrapped around, sometimes they tend to go out the window when we're talking about public health, because diseases, they impact all of us. Doesn't matter where you sit in society, doesn't matter what your race is. Yes, there's things that play into that, but overall, the disease doesn't care, and they show up everywhere. So I had a first half of my career was dealing with communities that were being impacted by a specific disease and working on messaging and things. And over the years, I never represented any of those communities directly. So it was, you had to balance leadership skills and learn how to be an ally, how to listen, and ultimately how to lead and have impact. And then the last 10 years of my career, I'll fast forward, and that's really been in workforce development. And so all the mission work that I've done and the positions that I've had over the last 10 years have all been focused around getting some type of individual or group position for their success. And so prior to here, I was at a company called Source America, a nonprofit. They're focused on getting individuals with disabilities employment. And Raquel was the chief legal officer, the former CEO. So when she left Source America and moved into the CEO role here, about a month or so into her tenure, I got a phone call saying, hey, I've got an opportunity. I think you'd be good for it. You know how to listen, you know how to work with the membership, you know how to design programs that are going to be impactful, and I'd love you to come over and be part of the team. And I made the move 5 years ago and came in as the chief operating officer. And then, as we know, last October, had the opportunity to move in the CEO role. And I haven't looked back. It's an amazing opportunity. I'm more dedicated than I've ever been. And I continue that overall vision of service for for the position that I'm in. So
That's awesome. Thank you. And for the sake of time, I'm going to just interject right here
jump
and
in.
make the announcement that you have started a podcast called Ship Out Loud. And
Launched yesterday. Yeah.
yes, correct, correct.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are interested, go into the podcast, Apple Podcast, or just simply Google Ship Out Loud, and you'll find it in various platforms. You can listen to the first, I think there's 6 episodes right now,
Yeah.
five, maybe 5 episodes. But the first one, it's about a 2 minute introduction by you, Chris. The second one is with Rosa, who is interviewing you. And then the
Correct.
next one is you interviewing Monique Herrera. And then the next one is with another gentleman. I forgot the name of the person, but it is very interesting. I heard the what or who is ship.
Yeah.
And that particular one is 36 minutes long, but you answer a lot of the questions. What is your
Yeah.
mission? What is your vision? Who you are as a person? You talk about you as an individual. You talk about the core values that you have. You talk about the service, the education, and you focus on the family. You had a conversation with the latest or the now deceased founder of SHIP, Rod
Yeah.
Garcia.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he mentioned to you was do not forget about the familia. Do not forget about the familia aspect of things, right? It could be a
Correct.
dysfunctional family. It could be a lovely family. It could be an interesting difference of opinion family type of thing. But that is the number one core value that he continuously and consistently mentioned. And
Yeah.
he mentioned it to you. How do you
Yeah.
feel about that particular endeavor of keeping the familia along with the actual core values going?
Yeah, no, you mentioned the conversation with Rod, and I think that was if I go back, so my first day at Ship was Nila, day one, and of course at Nilo that we tend to have the entire board, the whole staff is there, and I got off an airplane. Showed up at Nila, didn't know anybody except Raquel, had never met anybody at all at SHIP, had the opportunity to meet Miguel Alemany, who was sitting as the chair at that time. And then, as the next day went on, I had an opportunity to sit down with Rod and get introduced as the founder of SHIP and kind of hear from his perspective how SHIP had started and what he had done over the years and where the organization was at that time. And in that conversation, he really honed in on the growth and the positioning and the excitement around bringing Raquel and myself in, et cetera. But most importantly, he goes, no matter how much we grow and continue to grow as an organization, um, we can't lose sight of the familia. That was the core of the organization. That's what had gotten the organization to where it was 5 years ago. And that was something that no matter how big we got and whatever changed and, whatever society threw at us or whatever, that core value had to stay at the center of everything. And that really resonated with me because that's one family is one of my core values personally. And I mentioned my service and I mentioned how I've managed my career and it's always been about this essence of family. And so finding an organization and having the honor of serving and working for an organization that's one of the 4 core values, and I've got the founder sitting here saying this is the number one thing. No matter it's not, the numbers are important, the programs are important, how many people we're touching is important, but most important, don't lose sight of the familia. And so I think we've tried to carry that along. I know over the last 10 months, since I stepped in as the CEO role, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the communication, and a lot of the internal planning for 23 is focused on the member and really elevating our members' stories, our members' voice to the appropriate tables. When you look at the new strategic plan that's out, the third pillar is all about establishing our voice in places in the community that we currently don't exist. And so there's some direct linkage into Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C., but there's lots of spaces that we just haven't historically been at those tables. And so I think that keeping the familia core value front and center and recognizing where those spaces are that we haven't been that we should be, only positions us for the type of growth that Rod would have wanted and that he talked about for almost 50 years.
Right. And as you see in the screen in front of you through the Zoom window, right?
Yeah,
You see a full, literally a full screen. We have about 20 some
I did.
important
Hi.
people here, which is awesome. And this is great. This is the individuals that you represent at the national level. This
Yep.
is a sample of the individuals you represent. One of the key things that you mentioned, two things that I want to focus on, right? You mentioned a seat at the table.
Yep.
And with that, during the last conference, you said something really interesting, that some of the things that Mr. Mike and me and Kelvin, being part of the board, we have a certain look and aspect that is physical to us, right? And maybe certain individuals tell us something in our face, but behind closed doors,
Mhm.
at the table where the decisions are being made, something else happens. And this you mentioned this, and you
Yeah.
said that's where you, Chris, Dr. Chris Wilkie, can be an ally to us.
Mhm.
Can you kind of share and expand on that topic, if you recall
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I'm making chat comments over here that I'm amazed that you're pulling stuff out from a year ago, but that's awesome. That means something I said maybe resonated a little bit. But I think when we talk allyship specifically and we look at those things and those topics and the characteristics of what allyship is all about, and then you look at the current landscape across the DE&I space and across corporate America and honestly the American society as a whole, there's a number of factors that are at play right now and have been for a couple of years. There's political pressure for every company out there to have a DE&I officer, to have public initiatives and messaging out that this is what we're doing to level and course correct history when it comes to inequality and diversity as a whole and representation and inclusion. Um, but that public voice doesn't always translate to internal action, and we've seen that so many times as well, and so you have to really look at who's sitting in those true decision making positions, and so often we know through the data that typically that is a white male most times in most of corporate America still today. And that's the entire initiative, right? To change that, to make that representation more equitable and more inclusive. And that's how we get to terms like minority and underrepresented and all the things that we see in the data. But the reality is that many times there's a meeting or there's a discussion that's happening within a company and there's a voice that goes out, but then there's also that moment when the door closes and there's a handful of people still left in the room that are really making the decisions. And oftentimes those are the senior most executives, the white men still sitting around the table. And I mean, I've heard it referred to so many things over the years. It's the good old boy club. It's all the different things that we've all heard at some point or another. And true allyship is, yes, a component of it is that public facing message, but the bigger component of it is what happens when that door closes and there's the 3 to 5 people left in the room.
Right.
Who's
And
going to
that's where you
stand
come
up?
in.
That's
And
right. Who's going to stand up?
that's where you come in. Exactly. Yes.
And that's a table that because I am a white male, I can speak directly to it.
Right.
You
The
know?
other thing that you mentioned in one of your podcasts is you see the presentation here with all of us.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned is, yes, SHIP stands for Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, but we are conformed or made up of people that are engineers, people that are not engineers, and
Mhm.
males and females alike. And now we are stronger because of that. So can you share some insight how you are including or impulsing or motivating people to continue being part of this mission and vision that SHIP has and
Yeah.
embody those core values along with it, even regardless of the name being Hispanic engineers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a twofold conversation, right? Because we don't want to lose sight of the history and the mission and the segment of the general society that we are here to serve. And that is the Hispanic community. That is specifically Hispanics in STEM. And I think when you look at other societies across the country, they have lost some of that. It's gotten diluted in some cases because the audiences and the attendees at their events and stuff are, say, 70, 80% what that mission and that target audience is. I'm very proud that I can look at any corporate partner, any community partner, and say at our convention, at our main events, at our membership, we're 95 plus representative of the community that we're here to serve, that we were designed and originally created to serve. 50 years later, that is still by far the vast majority of our membership and our composition. You see things changing like degrees, and what are the top 5 majors that we have across the membership? Technology, for example, is one that has grown drastically over the 5 years I've been here, and now represents over 20% of our membership are pursuing some type of degree or education in technology or double major or something. Um, and our gender diversification has shifted a little bit. We're moving in the right direction, still towards that 50-50. I think we're sitting at about 63, 47, something like that. And so we're headed, we have a very good gender diversification, especially compared to just like the general demographic of the Hispanic community. We far exceed that, and we far exceed the representation of STEM degrees overall, with our gender diversification within SHIP. So there's things like that, those intersectionalities and kind of some of those sublayers, that I'm very proud to say and reinforce that we represent the community that we serve, and
Right.
that's something that a lot of the associations have. They haven't lost it, but it's gotten a little diluted over the years and over time, and we've stayed very true to that.
Right. And thank you for that response. That's awesome. And now you and I had a conversation, as I mentioned earlier this morning, and you said, "Hey, I need your help, and I think this small setting would be conducive to that." So this is the opportunity for you to open that ask and let us know how we, your ship familia
Yeah.
in San Diego, can help you out. How can we help
Absolutely.
you?
And I'm keeping an eye on the chat too. So Mike, you've got a quick question in here. I'm going to answer it. And I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. So you're saying the IPC is our input into corporate America. What companies do we need to look at over this group? What do you mean look at over the group?
Well, you're talking about the corporate America, the white male behind in the boardroom.
Hmm.
So we do have a lot of interaction with STEM corporations.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is that you may want to look beyond that to get more companies diverse in, and not just STEM fields, but other fields to get involved with SHIP.
Yeah, and I think so. So the IPC is now up to 70 plus. And I got notification this morning, and you guys just, shh, it's coming officially. The career fair floor is sold out at convention. So we have maxed the entire space in Charlotte, 100%. So we have over 300 companies that'll be represented on the floor at convention. And, I think the companies that come to us, Mike, are, of course, some of the best in the world, but they also have very strong and deeply rooted DE&I initiatives, and they're very successful in what they do. They're very dedicated to the space and to the recruitment efforts and to having not only an impact but truly drive change. And so I think, when I talk about the diversity theater and I talk about some of the things that are out there, yeah, they are out there, and they're things that our members have to be aware of, and they have to know these things do exist. And at the same time, I would say the companies that we're bringing to our membership, that's not what they're representing. So there's a much bigger landscape out there beyond the 300 companies or 400 companies that SHPE works with on any given day. And I would say the ones that are at the table with us are the ones that are committed, that are pushing for those changes, that are making impactful measures within their own company to demonstrate and show and track that they are moving successfully towards their DE&I initiatives. But I also have to say, the reality is there's so many other mindsets out there, and not everybody has that same level of commitment in today's landscape. And so for the membership who are pursuing the companies that may not be represented with us, or come across those, the local, the family owned, the et cetera, whatever that is, and there's some big ones out there too that have been in the news, that have been in the news for this exact thing. It's really just making our membership aware that this is something to keep an eye on. This is something to be aware of. And just because the job might be the perfect job or the dream job or the right salary, make sure you're assessing the culture that you're going into to work in as well. I was told one time, if you take your sleep hours out of the night, you spend more time awake at your job than you do with your family at home, 5 days out of the week. And so that culture, that workspace, needs to be inclusive. It needs to be in something that you enjoy. It needs to be something that you feel welcomed at, and not only feel welcomed at, but that you are welcomed at, and that your voice is relevant and impactful. And that's really what I'm speaking to, is the landscape far beyond the companies that interact with SHPE. Because if they're at the table with us, just the fact that they're at the table, they're already making a commitment. And then we know by their interactions and their actions with our membership that dedication is so real and so impactful.
Thank you. Thank you. We have so we're
Yeah.
gonna
So I know we got like 10 minutes, and I'm going to leverage the chat a little bit here too, but I am coming into Hispanic Heritage Month. And so, I talked to Lazaro. Of course, I've got half a dozen speaking engagements coming up. We're also in conference season, and I will be out and about meeting with sponsors and corporate reps and different community leaders. And I would love to hear 1 to 2 things that come to mind if you were sitting in my shoes and you were going to be speaking during Hispanic Heritage Month. What are the 1 or 2 things that SHPE's voice and SHPE's message should definitely touch on? And I ask the question because when I've done the research and looked at the types of presentations that tend to be given during Hispanic Heritage Month, they're very cultural and heritage focused. History of the Hispanics overall, etc. That isn't Hispanics in STEM specifically. There's no STEM tie. So as the leading Hispanic STEM organization, when we have a platform like this during Hispanic Heritage Month, what's the message that we should be putting out? And so I told Lazaro, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to hear from you. If you had a 15-minute presentation in a platform like this, what would be the message from not just a Hispanic and not just STEM, but a Hispanic STEM student or professional?
So I see Dr. Gloria Bañuelos has a hand raised, and I'm assuming it's to answer that. I see your hand up, Angelica. If it's related to that, you can respond. If not, we'll get back to you. But Gloria, you mind sharing?
Sure, Lázaro. I do want to just be mindful that Angelica did have her hand up before me. So I do want to cede the floor to her in case she wanted to go first.
I just want to say something really quickly. Thank you so much for that information. I just wanted to say from a HR perspective, as a coach in our community, I think one of the things that we need to share with the youth when leaders are participating and coaching, the youth, is to teach them how to ask those questions about, you know, the culture in the office, what are feel-good questions to ask, because as much as you want to say, you know, you want to meet all these check boxes, you know, mark them all off. I mean, as an adult, we know, you know, we got to ask those questions because in corporate America, it's really tough. But I think teaching our youth to speak to those who already work there, you know, in their internships, be insightful when they're there, and even when they're in the interviews, to ask those appropriate questions, because they don't know to ask those kinds of questions. So those are something I think us as leaders at SHPE that we need to make sure that we instill that it's okay to ask those questions, that they have a right to ask those questions. And then the other thing that might touch on as far as presentation is, as much as I love our culture, not everybody comes from the migrant work, the farm fields.
Yep.
So I want to make sure that I get to share with you that maybe we paint a different story when we're doing presentations, that this is a new generation of people. This is another innovative generation that's coming after our generation. So as much as we want to remember where we come from, not everybody comes from that. And so we want to make sure that we don't paint the same picture that Hispanics are this one kind of person, because we're not.
You know, so one thing that I've started trying to, in my head, play around with is how to flip that script a little bit.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, and this has been in any population that I've ever worked with who's quote underrepresented in a space, all the data, everything's the negative story, the challenging story, the hardship, and of course that translates to resilience and overcoming, you know, etc. But everything's not doom and gloom.
Right.
There's an entire positive story that oftentimes it's not presented that way. It's not worded that way. It's not, you know, it's about the data, and then, you know, oh, look at everything we've been through and everything we overcame, and how do we position the success and the positive that the Hispanic community brings to the table.
What you're doing, Dr. Chris, with your podcast, you're leading and you're pushing and you're showcasing tangible information through audio, which is getting to the audience closer. Having opportunities like this, like jumping into Cafecito chats with us, allowing us to have that interaction of literally one-on-one in a virtual format, is really great, so that you can hear our input, so that you can listen to what we're saying. Literally, you're getting feedback right off the bat. So with that, you know, I think you can pinpoint and maneuver through this type of setup by showcasing and telling the individuals you're successful because you have core values, and this is the core values that you have. Follow your heart, follow your education. It's important. This is how you achieve success. So that could be a part of SHPE and how you're driving it. The other thing is, talk about allyship, because you're the right candidate to talk about that. Just what you said, you know, making deals in front of people is something when you are a certain person, but behind closed doors, if you're not there, those deals happen and you might not be present. So you have to have an advocate that definitely supports you and the mission and the vision, blindfolded. Without a doubt, they will back you up. And if you can talk about allyship in that way, and people can definitely understand, and the industry listens and hears it, they're like, okay, we got to make a change. We have to definitely embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, bar none, with our eyes closed. So that would be a great message to hear and to share with the Hispanics. And with that, I'm gonna let Gloria share some.
Sure. Hi, thank you. Gloria Bañuelos. I'm on the board, VP of Operations. Thank you so much today for being with us today, Chris, and everyone on the line. I just want to echo what Judith said, is that, you know, we are the, it's the Society of Professional Engineers, right? So focus on the profession, focus on the pathway of the of K-12 through, you know, the career, the early professional, the mid-professional, the long, you know, the seasoned professional, right? Focus on that pipeline, focus on the, you know, what's the data, you know, along this pathway. I don't necessarily, you know, the pathway. Yep. And I think that's what's important. Focus on the data, focus on, you know, where in that pathway are we sort of losing, or are we losing engagement? And someone said something about, like, you know, there's larger populations of young women that are in this profession. You know, what kind of programming, you know, do we offer to these professionals to be successful, to ask the right questions, to be an advocate for their own advancement, right? As women, as professionals, right? So I think it's really important that we do move away from the cultural. You know, everything around Hispanic Heritage Month has been about the culture, and we're missing the point, in my opinion. We're completely missing it, because it should be all about empowering, educating in this career, in this field, and understanding what are the challenges and how do we overcome those challenges. So thank you for listening.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I'm scrolling chats and I'm taking notes. And so, like, this is, you know, there were a couple of topics that showed up in the chat, and, you know, I've got professional boundaries. I've got managing your own, you know, basically becoming comfortable being uncomfortable, and whether that speaks personally to you or whether that speaks to the audience and the people sitting around the table with you. Both of those all feed into boundaries. Made a note that, you know, success doesn't have to equate to burnout. That's a huge one. I've had burnout and experienced it personally. There was a point in my career where it almost cost me my marriage. My wife looked at me and said, "Hey, enough's enough." And you know, and we were not newlyweds at that point. We've been together 23 years, married 21, and back then we were like, I don't know, I'm going to say 12 to 13 years married. So it wasn't like it was, you know, we were learning each other. We knew each other well, and so that one really speaks to me personally. And, you know, and a seat at the table. I think when we talk about a seat at the table, and it was a little more eloquently put in the comments, but my note here that I wrote down is that there's a balance of something. It's almost like we need to be saying, "Oh, thank you for allowing us to be here." You know, it's an honor. And the reality is, we should be there. We deserve to be there. You deserve to be there. The organization deserves to be at the table and the voice, and having that piece built into this messaging as well. Again, it's kind of, the words are powerful, and there's a small little tweak in some of that really completely shifts the dialogue with just by tweaking a couple of words. So, you know, that's a summary of about half of what I've captured some notes on here. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah, awesome.
I really appreciate
any
it.
other comments that might help Dr. Chris Wilkie structure his
Lazaro, I want to be respectful of your time, but I'm happy. I do have a few more minutes if we want to hang out and keep the dialogue going for maybe another 5 or 7 minutes. That's completely up to y'all. And
Mike Cruz and I have conversation. One of the conversations was mindful and communicating with your spouse that your partner is also what you're doing, right? Can you hear me?
Lazaro, we lost you almost for all of that.
Okay, yeah. So literally, Mike and I have had conversations about, you know, just what you said, the partners and communication, and being conscientious of not burning out and being mindful of the time with the family, right? Because everybody has a family for the most part, be it your parents, be it your significant other, be it your children, and work. But Mike, any insight on how to be on board and keep straight with your spouse and be in that same channel of commitment?
Well, first of all, Mina had her hand up. Mina, do you want to say something before I jump in here?
Oh, thank you very much. I was over here making my notes as well. I just want to say, it really is truly an honor to be able to meet with you, Chris, virtually, and hear the significant backgrounds of what our generation, our new generation here that are with us, for those of us that are lifetime members, as I am. I come from a background in aerospace and traditionally just transferred over to what I learned from there so much, which is protocol. And so protocol and etiquette is the industry I'm in. And I'd love to see a little more advancement with that in your organization and have workshops. And I see the heads nodding because this is the message I get. And it stops there because I'm trying to get to the people but things always change. Oh, that's not, this person's in charge now, this person's in charge there. So very nice of you, Lázaro, to bring him on board. It is so important that these extracurricular that are not part of your curriculum in school be taught these things. And that's coming from middle school students that have had some little interviews with me. So I want to share, you guys are not, you're in the middle part, you're the next generation. You have to be ready to accept these things, especially interviews. The biggest thing that's going to sell you is your smile. I bet you guys didn't even know that. And you only have 5 seconds to make a very good impression. So with that, I leave those comments and thank you very much, Chris, for all that input.
No, thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Okay, the question was, how do we get through it all, Lázaro? And Chris, I've been where you've been. My wife looked at me in the face, says, hey, you're gonna go do this? And I says, yeah. And then she says, well, here's your bag. Here's your bag.
We didn't get that far, but yeah, I understand.
No, and Lázaro, that's I think for all of you young people, because Chris and I have been through it, it's a long road. You have to give up a lot of your time and a lot of your family's time. So what I told Lázaro in talking about family issues and staying in there is that the first thing you need to do when you get involved with SHPE or anything that's going to take you away from the family, you got to get commitment from your spouse. If you don't get commitment from your spouse, it ain't going to work, because it takes the familia, your family, the SHPE family has to come together and work together. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. So again, your spouse is important in your development and in your involvement with the community. So we talk about strategies of bettering ourselves, et cetera, but like Mina says, it's the smile. And the one that's going to keep a smile on your face is your spouse. Okay.
That's true. That old school saying of, if
mama's not
happy, happy wife, happy spouse. Exactly. Yeah. I saw a stat the other day, Mike, that piggybacks off of what you were saying. You're talking about the spouse or the partner, et cetera. But I also saw a stat and heard one this last weekend that on any given day, the average American adult makes 35,000 choices. 35,000. Now, the majority of those are on an unconscious level, and you move on. But the point is that if we're making those many choices on any given day, what are the buckets and what are the things that we're prioritizing that are truly life-altering, life-impacting decisions, and what are the things where you're making that unconscious choice, or maybe it's a very conscious choice between, vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream? And how much time and energy and mind space do we allow some of those types of decisions to take over when we really should be focused on some of the more key, important, big decisions? And so I would say yes to everything you just said. Keep in mind that we make almost 35,000 choices, and in order to make good, healthy choices, you have to sometimes pause and ask the question, where are you as yourself in those priorities? Where is your family or those key people relationships in your life? in those priorities, and how are the decisions that you're making impacting those two areas or groups specifically? Because let's face it, we are a social people person by nature. Even if you're an introvert, you still value those relationships. We are relationship people, and we also are self people. We have to take care of ourselves in the process.
And with that, when I say you got to make your spouse happy, it's just not smiling at them. You have to talk with them, explain to them what's happening, and it's not just your spouse, but your better half, whoever you have to deal with. You got to sit down and talk with them. It's not just I'm going to go do this. Be with me.
Yeah,
it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
Before I forget, let's take a group picture as we're literally coming to a close. We exceeded, but let me take a group picture. For those of you who can turn on your cameras right now, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, with that, thank you so much for the picture.
Awesome.
And I saw, Cindy, you had one comment, and we're gonna take 2 last comments, so that would be great. Cindy.
Okay, yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So from my own personal experience, when I used to work in corporate America, I always found that when it came to, like all the different diversity months, right? We had Hispanic Heritage Month, we had Black History Month, Asian American Month. I always just found that, for like Black History Month, there were like really big budgets, a big turnout, a big celebration. For Hispanic Heritage Month, Asian American Month, I didn't really see that like in the corporate world, not so much. Especially for Hispanic Heritage Month. I mean, we weren't getting as much of a turnout as like other groups were getting. So it was a very interesting experience, like working in that world. And it was almost a little discouraging, because having been part of that BRG, and then you put so much extra work and so much extra time that is typically unpaid across the board. I mean, this is all volunteer work, right? So I would like to hear more about, staying motivated through that and pushing through, and being there, I guess, with the Latinos. But that's just something that like I would like to hear more about, like like the different statistics between like different companies. I know a lot of this stuff isn't shareable, but like turnout for different events, budget wise, because for us to expand and to grow, sometimes it can feel a little hard, right? Sometimes it feels like there are like almost like favorites, or I don't know, there's like a strange disparity there. So just wanted to bring that up.
Cindy, I mean, you're definitely spot on in several areas. I think there's been some movement in some of that space, but and you're right, some of what you're asking about is more proprietary, within those companies. But what I can say is a couple of key observations over the last 10 months, sitting in the CEO role and seeing things from a slightly different lens. If you look at chief diversity officers across most of corporate America, the majority tend to be Black compared to Hispanic or Asian or Indian. Why is that? If you look at budgets and, multi-year commitments or, et cetera, to organizations like SHPE compared to the Hispanic, the Asian, the Black, the women organizations, you will see differences there. You will see larger budgets to certain communities, and that's not unique to one organization or one company. You look across the board, you will see that that there tends to be more dollars put towards certain communities. There tends to be more Black executives, for example, in a CDO position, a Chief Diversity Officer position, and others. And you're right, Mary, you know, that Blacks were the first to essentially push and organize, and their voice is much more united from years and years of history than the Hispanic community. That's an ongoing conversation within the Hispanic community that I hear of is, you know, we bifurcate our own voice because we, you know, the Mexican voice versus the Puerto Rican voice versus and all of a sudden the Hispanic umbrella overall has now diluted itself compared to the Black community is the Black voice in the Black community, and they present a very united front as a single community. And you look at throughout history, and there's all these reasons and all these different things that come to it, but I think all of that plays into the environment that we deal with today. And, you know, so I was on a call with 5 chief diversity officers who were all Hispanic and in corporate America about 3 hours ago. And, you know, that was one of their observations is how do we continue to even diversify and be inclusive when it's not just about getting an underrepresented person of color into some of these positions. It's about having Hispanics specifically in some of these positions and more of these positions across corporate America. And all those different factors come into play for sure.
Okay. All right. One last comment, Angelica.
Really quick. This topic is so, I talk about it a lot. My first comment is I feel like the squeaky wheel got heard. And I think culturally as Hispanic, Latino, we don't like to make a ruckus. And so I think that plays into that. And so now, like I said, this is a new generation of people. I was on the first ERG for LPL Financial years ago. We had to be the trailblazers, whether we liked it or not, because we wanted this for our company and for our group. But with that being said, today, we have to be very, very, very careful that it's not us against them,
right?
Because that environment can happen and you don't want that. The whole
Correct.
thing is you want to be inclusive. And at the end of the day, we're all in the same bucket. So that's something that I teach people and I coach others about, that is, you know, you got to be the trailblazer. You got to be the squeaky wheel. If you don't want to play, then don't play. But you want to just make sure that you're not us against them. Don't work in silos, be inclusive, invite others, you know, so it's not just about us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been a part of that. And, you know, I've seen it where initially I'd be like, man, how come they're always getting all the props, and why are all the CEOs this, and how come we're not? No, it's you have to look at the big picture and realize that the squeaky wheel got heard, and, you know, thank God they got heard, right? So if you look at it that way and not so much us against them, that kind of perspective, because it can happen, you know, especially being ethnocentric. We're so proud of who we are and all that, but we just have to be very conscious and aware that we don't become us against them.
But we also have a right to be at the table as well. And you know, so it's definitely that balancing act, because you're right, you don't want to bifurcate and take 3 steps back overall. So I definitely agree with that component, and I'll piggyback with a final thought on allyship as a whole. Oftentimes, allyship gets presented as it's a white community's initiative. It's our responsibility to be the ally. But the truth of the matter is, when you look at the core characteristics of allyship, we're all allies to any group outside of our own group. So while you may be Hispanic and per data or per company in this environment, you may fit in an underrepresented category, but you're also an ally to every other category that's presented within that data or that's found in that culture and in that company or in that environment. And so leveraging both voices is so important for all of us. So love your comments and definitely understand the balancing act that you're speaking to.
Thank you so much. And with that, I want to acknowledge you, Dr. Chris Wilkie, for being the CEO for SHPE National, for representing us, for leading us, and for once again, just being the kind, empathetic person that you are, and for joining us today at Cafecito Chats here at SHPE San Diego. I want to say thank you to you for your time, for your commitment, and for letting us also chime in and help and structure your presentations for Hispanic Heritage Month.
No, I love it.
I want to say thank you to Kelvin, Mike Cruz, Dr. Tracy Wen, Elizabeth Esaguirre, Justina Sanchez, Omar Hernandez, Jose, Ricky Alberto, Isaac Velara, Saúl, Oscar Gutierrez, Mina Martinez, Angélica Velázquez, and I'm missing some other people, Abril, Cindy Wise, Marta, Jonathan, Ken, and those other individuals that joined us. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Listen to SHPE Out Loud. The host of it is Chris Wilkie, and he has some wonderful guests, and listen to all that information that he has to share. And join us next Wednesday for Cafecito Chats at SHPE San Diego. With that, muchas gracias. Que tengan buen día. We'll see you next week. And we'll see you at SHPE National, Dr. Chris Wilkie.
I can't wait. It's going to be an amazing event. Thank you all again for having me, and look forward to seeing you in the community.
Thank you.